So here we go. Are you ready to dive in? Let's get right to the point. So I was on Facebook this week. There's the point. I was on Facebook this week, and I saw this interesting post from a congregant who I'll leave unnamed, Keith, and he put online, "I have chosen to stop wearing underwear." And I thought, that's odd. Interesting. Oh, go back one, Joan. Wrong slide. You're giving away the line there. So don't read that yet. But he posted online this quirky thing. And I thought, well, interesting, funny, weird, and I started laughing. So as I started laughing, I decided to respond with emojis. And a little lesson on, social media, if you don't know, emojis are just these little faces that show how you're feeling. So I responded with the emoji that means I'm laughing so hard I'm crying, and you're weird. I don't know why you said that. And I get a message back, which just because I was on, I checked the messages. I usually don't check them. And this message pops back, and now we can have the other one. And the message reads this. "Hi, Erin, I love your laugh, but you should not have liked or commented. Now you have to pick from one of the following below and post it as your status. This is the 2015 breast cancer awareness game. Don't be a spoiled sport. Pick your poison from one of these and post it as your status." Now, I'm not going to read all of them because some of them were a little hard to read. But some of them were things like, how do you get rid of foot fungus? No toilet paper. Goodbye, socks. I think I'm in love with someone. I've decided to stop wearing underwear. I'm getting married. I'm a lesbian. And then a couple others. And it goes on to say, don't be a spoil sport, don't ruin the game. You have to post this as your status, and you can't say anything, no explanations. And he included a little sweet, sorry, I fell for it too. And so I take a deep breath thinking, now I'm laughing even harder going, you're kidding me, like this is my list to pick from, and and I don't want to break this. I feel like I should, do the shout out. Because if you've seen these awareness games, they happen every year. And maybe you get suckered into them like me. I forget that they're happening, and then I don't recognize it. So I look at the poison that I have to choose from, and I decide that I'm going to post no toilet paper, goodbye socks. Yeah. Now, I post this on my Facebook feed, and I have to admit that I, as fast as I could, posted another article right after it, hoping that it'd go far down as fast as it can so people wouldn't see it. But not so lucky. Of course, people started commenting on it, and people started liking it, and I had to be there with that, of knowing everyone thinks I ran out of toilet paper and just used my socks. So then, leaving it be and letting it go, and knowing full well that there's no way to tell all the 1,000+ people on Facebook that this didn't really happen. There's no way to really get back to people. I mean, people may never be at your Facebook page again. You may have just lost them out to the ethers, and they're sharing stories now about you and your toilet paper use forever, right? So then, the next slide. I show up at my Adventures in Spirituality orientation to train the trainers, and Miss Linda Chappell says to me, "Did you have time to go to the grocery store? Did you have time to get to the store today?" And I'm thinking, what is she talking about? Why do I need to go to the store today? And she says, and I say no, and she says, "I didn't think so, so I brought you this." To which I politely accepted and thanked her, not sharing the story yet again. And then fast forward to getting home. I'm getting home from a day of work, and I have Reverend Mary, one of my great friends from ministerial school, staying with me. And she, I walk in the door, she's already there, and she says to me, "Erin, what's up with the socks? Didn't you see I have wet wipes on the counter? Why didn't you use the wet wipes?" To her, I spilled the beans. And then I get to the Village Mike on Thursday. I get to the Village Mike, and what happens? I see Mr. John Fry for the first time in the week, and he hands me a pile of toilet paper rolls. And John, here's the socks. Perfect experience to kick off this week's series on vulnerability. Even when it's a joke, and especially when it's not. What do we think when we think about how people think about us? How does it feel to share things? How does it feel to be shamed? How does it feel to be vulnerable? How does it feel to live out loud? How much do you care about what others think about you? How much do you worry about judgments? Do you worry about whether or not other people will agree or disagree with your judgments? Do you feel shame or embarrassment? Does shame or embarrassment or a fear of vulnerability change how you show up? What you share of yourself? These are some of the topics we're getting ready to dive into. Authenticity, vulnerability, shame, judgments. Even though on a human level and on a spiritual level, we know that managing people's ideas of us and even managing our own ideas of ourselves is completely impossible, isn't it? Completely impossible. But still, there's a tendency to desire to do that. In the next 6 weeks, if you don't notice your vulnerability, we haven't done our job. Brené Brown starts the book Daring Greatly with part of a speech from Teddy Roosevelt in 1910, the Citizenship in a Republic speech. It goes like this. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself in a worthy cause? Who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement? And who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly? So we're here to unravel myths about vulnerability that will include whatever it is for you in your personal life, things known and unknown, maybe to the people even closest to you. That includes unpacking social paradigms, social constructs that keep us in sheltered states of protection, with the illusion that somehow if we keep separate, if we keep secret, if we aren't vulnerable, we'll be safe. Are you ready to break through that myth? Are we ready to break through that myth? Have any of you known a shell cracker? A shell cracker is a person that you feel refreshingly comfortable with. Someone that you feel like you could tell anything to, you could show up however you want to, you could show up in complete authenticity, and you will be completely accepted, just as you are. Someone that you feel so comfortable with that they bring out a side of you that maybe you haven't seen around other people. Someone that you can be vulnerable with, fully and completely vulnerable with. If you found this and you live on the planet, you know you have one of the most valuable and precious things in the world, don't you? One of the most valuable and precious things that will ever come your way is another human being you can be vulnerable with. What does it make us feel like? when we have those relationships, I think it makes us feel real. To me, it makes me feel alive. It makes me feel like this is the real me. This is the me I was born to be. This is how I am. And I can feel the core of my being. I can feel whose I am when I'm in that state. But a lot of us don't have that state very often. So can we cultivate it? Can we demystify vulnerability and begin to cultivate resilience, as Brené Brown says, resilience to shame and a deep comfort within ourselves? I believe that we can, and I believe that when we do, we break through paradigms and we break into a deeper experience of our God self, our God consciousness, our enlightened way of being. Sue Sicking, a Unity author, said, "We cannot be true to the God self within and follow the dictates of the past or of others." And I would add, or the dictates of the egos. We cannot be truly our God self. We cannot be truly free until we release all of these attachments. But these attachments are pretty subtle, and we live in a culture and a society that tends to enforce them. James Dillett Freeman, Unity poet, said, "Anytime we go beyond self, we come to selflessness. And another name for selflessness is God." The moment we are protecting or managing our image, the moment we are worried or concerned about what others think about us, in fact, the moment we're worried about what we think of us, we are protecting an illusionary self. We are attached to a label or an idea of ourselves that is not the true self, because we know when we practice unity, we know in truth when we get into the depths of the spiritual practice that the only true self is the Christ consciousness, the awakened consciousness, the enlightened state of being, the self that goes beyond a body, the self that goes beyond a role, the self that goes beyond time and space. Amen? Anything else is an illusion. Anything else is an identity, and the moment that we're defending an identity, whether it's for ourselves or for the world, we're in a sense of separation. We're in ego. We have the veil pulled over our eyes. So what happens when we're not trying to manage our appearance? Not concerned of what others think, not concerned of what we think. When we're not defending, protecting, polishing, or bargaining. It's pretty refreshing. It's pretty refreshing. But it's also pretty bold and daring and can be pretty scary. What is vulnerability to me? Vulnerability is those things that a lot of people talk about. A lot of people understand vulnerability to be. It's emotional risk. It's uncertainty. It's exposure. But it's also a paradox to me. Vulnerability is the place of pure comfort. And the paradox is that it's also uncomfortable. It's a place where I feel safe. When I ultimately arrive there, I feel safe. But also, to my identity, it's dangerous. It's real, authentic. To me, it's when I feel like I'm in sync with myself, in sync with other people, in sync with belonging on this planet, in sync with my wholeness, in sync with my being. But with that experience of feeling in sync or aligned comes moving through what feels unpredictable, what feels like chaos, what feels uncontrollable or unmanageable. I have to move through that and be willing to be vulnerable, to experience oneness. Mark Nepo, in his book, The Book of Awakening, says this: "Imagine that beneath our distrust, there is a stream of ongoing oneness. And the only way to enter it is to take off our distrust and bad experience like clothes. Imagine that in entering that stream naked, we reach for the moment with every hand that ever reached. We reach that place that we all have in common. And the place that we all truly have in common is the place of our source, the place of divine mind. So, what is vulnerability to you? Raise your hand if you're ready.
I think vulnerability to me is not wearing my makeup and sitting in my jammies, and I know my husband will not judge me.
What is vulnerability to you? Talking out in a big group. Bravo, you just did it. Welcome. Where are you?
When I am going to step up and do a vulnerable moment, I have this vision of walking on the pirate's plank blindfolded and just falling into the sea. And that just adds on to the...
What is vulnerability to you?
I feel vulnerable when I speak my truth rather than glossing over.
Everyone in the back is getting real scared because it's usually such a safe place back here. What is vulnerability to you?
Dressing really weird in front of your friends and knowing that they're not going to judge you. Like wearing knee-high socks that are really weirdly colored, or like the shoes that have like like really weird shoes and really weird clothes.
The Course in Miracles says, "In my defenselessness, my safety lies."
So how do you experience that?
Right now.
Thank you.
I feel vulnerable when the map of where I thought I was going dissolves.
Are you ready for me?
I feel vulnerable when someone else makes a decision for me.
I feel vulnerable when I say what it's like to be in my skin. And people ask me, do I need to see a therapist? Or why am I being so sensitive?
I feel vulnerable whenever I give myself away with somebody that I thought I trusted, and yet they make fun of me as I am, and not too sure whether I am is good enough.
I feel vulnerable when I walk into a group or a room with people I don't know.
I feel vulnerable when I hear of someone who has lost a child, because I have lost a child. And it's gotten better over the years, but there's still that pain that comes back.
I feel vulnerable when I'm bringing a lesson sermon and I had to labor it over all night and look out in the audience and someone is shaking their head up and down, yet no. And then it makes me vulnerable. Am I really reaching and bringing to them what is needed for that day?
I believe I feel vulnerable when I run out of toilet paper.
That's a great segue.
I felt vulnerable this week when I told my boss I was trying, and he said, very trying.
I feel vulnerable when I'm getting to know someone.
So can we all take a deep breath together? And notice what that feels like. To really notice how it changes the room, doesn't it? It changes our hearts. It changes space. So is it weak? Is it arrogant? Is it narcissistic? Or is it authentic and real? Does it give us permission? Does it break through everything that we're always longing to break through so that we can arrive at who we know we are? Brené Brown says vulnerability is not weakness. And the uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure we face every day are not optional. Our only choice is a question of engagement. Our willingness to own and engage with our own vulnerability determines the depth of our courage and the clarity of our purpose. The level to which we protect ourselves from being vulnerable is a measure of our fear and disconnection. When we spend our lives waiting until we're perfect or bulletproof before we walk into the arena, we ultimately sacrifice relationships and opportunities that may not be recoverable. We squander our precious time, and we turn our backs on our gifts, those unique contributions that only we can make. She says we must dare to show up and let ourselves be seen. Amen. Adyashanti, who is an American spiritual teacher that leads satsangs, said this: spiritual people can be some of the most violent people you will ever meet. Mostly they are violent to themselves. They violently try to control their minds, their emotions, and their bodies. They become upset with themselves and beat themselves up for not rising up to the conditioned mind's idea of what it believes enlightenment to be. No one ever became free through such violence. Why is it that so few people are truly free? because they try to conform to ideas, concepts, and beliefs in their heads. They try to concentrate their way to heaven. But freedom is about the natural state, the spontaneous and unself-conscious expression of beingness. If you want to find it, see that the very idea of a someone who is in control is a concept created by the mind. Take one step backward from the unknown. So are we ready to dare greatly? Brene says that vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. So if you would, breathe into some affirmations with me. She has a section on page 9 where she goes into what we're working on cultivating. And I'll put these into affirmative form for us. So taking a deep, authentic, vulnerable breath in. I let go of what people think. Together. I let go of what people think. I let go of perfectionism. I let go of numbing and powerlessness. I let go of scarcity and fear of the dark. I release the need for certainty. Together. I release the need for certainty. I let go of comparison. I let go of exhaustion as a status symbol and productivity as self-worth. I let go of anxiety as a lifestyle. I let go of anxiety as a lifestyle. I release self-doubt and supposed to. Together. I let go of being cool and always in control. Together. I let go of being cool and always in control. And together, I dare greatly. I dare greatly. Sue Sicking said, every one of us will die to the limited personal self we think we are and become alive to a completely new being, a superman or superwoman. This is a tantalizing glimpse of what is now at hand. Namaste.